Snapchat has always had interesting ideas, but they've continually struggled for relevance in light of Facebook. For a while, people were skeptical, but then this happened. It begs the question, how did Snapchat bounce back? At its core, Snapchat is an app focused on sending disappearing photos. Initially, many people wrote it off as a sexting app, but as the years went on, it became clear that there was something more substantive behind it. They rolled out feature after feature, and the company became one of the hotbeds of innovation in the tech industry. They had managed to capture the teenage market like no other app had before, and everyone was watching them. Over the past few years, Silicon Valley has faced a lot of scrutiny, be it antitrust, fake news, or data breaches.
They weren't using the data and they deleted it.
Even though Snapchat has largely remained outside of the controversy, they didn't appear to be capitalizing on their potential. The company faced a lot of setbacks after their IPO in 2017, and by the end of 2018, things were looking grim.
I believe this company is going out of business. I do not believe it'll be a prediction. Snap will not be an independent company by the end of 2019.
Despite the narrative around the company, they somehow proved all of the naysayers wrong. In 2019, their earnings were up, they were gaining market share, their Android app was revamped, and the stock rebounded. It became clear that they were a company capable of learning from its mistakes, and that there was a reason why people kept coming back, even if Instagram did stories better. I've been following Snapchat closely for years now, and what's always been true is that the deeper I dig, the more I'm sold on the underlying purpose and vision for its existence. CEO Evan Spiegel makes a compelling case as to what Snapchat has to offer that the rest of social media has been missing.
As time goes on, I think it will become more and more clear to people that our values are actually really hard to copy.
I believe this. While on the surface, the company might seem like just another social media player, I think they're headed in a different direction from their competitors. Ultimately, I think Evan Spiegel's obsessive belief in the ephemeral nature of conversation will allow Snapchat to survive anything. There's a lot to unpack here. To understand what Snapchat is today, we're going to need a bit of history. The company was the brainchild of 3 Stanford students, Evan Spiegel, Bobby Murphy, and Reggie Brown. The concept was simple. Take a picture, set a timer for how long it'll last, send it to your friend, and let it disappear. The app initially launched on the App Store on July 13th of 2011 as Peekaboo. As the original name suggests, they initially embraced the indecent purposes behind self-destructing pictures. But this shifted quickly. Only 1 month later, Brown is pushed out of the company over equity disputes. After the fallout, Spiegel and Murphy rebranded to Snapchat, trying to distance themselves from their beginnings. Unlike Instagram, the app was not an overnight success, but over the course of 10 months, the app had amassed 100,000 users. It was at this time that Jeremy Liu, a partner at Lightspeed Ventures, saved them. His reason for it? He was sold on the vision the founders had developed.
They talked about how there was something missing from social media, how it had become almost like a highlight reel for your life. What Snapchat did by making delete a default was to bring back the spontaneity and emotion and authenticity of communication that people have always had with their close friends.
This became the heart of Snapchat, and would be the vision that they would sell to their investors year after year. Upon receiving Liu's nearly $500,000 investment, Spiegel dropped out of Stanford mere weeks before he would have graduated. More than anything, I think this was symbolic. It's likely that he wanted to follow in the footsteps of the greats before him. The two moved back to LA and continued development out of Evan's dad's house. But it wasn't too long before they outgrew that. Over the next 5 years, Snap's growth felt unstoppable. They rolled out feature after feature and garnered a huge following. From stories to geofilters to acquisitions of companies that enabled lenses and Bitmoji. Snap appeared to be making all of the right bets, and everyone in the social media industry was taking note. So if everyone was watching, why didn't they get snatched up like so many others in Silicon Valley have? How have they managed to remain independent? This requires getting in the mind of Evan Spiegel. Even though the two co-founders possessed less than 45% of stock options, they made sure that they possessed over 88% of voting power when they went to IPO. In other words, no investor has any say in whether or not the company sells. Spiegel and Murphy have total control. In his USC commencement speech, Spiegel stated the following:
And I'm now convinced that the fastest way to figure out if you're doing something that is truly important to you is to find someone who will offer you a bunch of money to part with it.
And this has happened multiple times now. When Facebook's competitor Poke failed, Zuckerberg made Spiegel an offer of $3 billion in cash. This was to a 2-year-old company with no apparent business model or path to profitability. All it had was a user base. To everyone's shock, the then 23-year-old turned down this offer. He recounted this in a Forbes interview. There are very few people in the world who get to build a business like this. I think trading that for some short-term gain isn't very interesting. Again, in 2016, he allegedly turned down Google's offer to buy the company for $30 billion. For better or worse, what we see here is Spiegel's ambition and hubris. I get the impression that he wants to make a dent in the universe. That above all, he wants to do something that he personally finds meaningful. Perhaps it's a genuine desire to make social media more authentic. Perhaps it's motivated by his ego. Maybe it's a bit of both. None of us can say for sure. But with how many opportunities he's had to get out, I don't think that money is his primary motivator, especially considering his last piece of advice in his commencement speech.
And find something you aren't willing to sell.
If they weren't going to sell, they needed a business model and capital. They tried many things throughout the years, such as sponsored filters or making a store to buy lenses. But they ultimately came back to advertising. Obviously, people wouldn't be too keen to have ads inserted in between their snaps with friends. So the company had to get clever. It quickly separated the app into 2 segments: chat and content. Their business model was made pretty simple because of this. Capture attention through chat, and then redirect some of that attention to content where they could insert advertisements. Finally, they would keep the cycle going by drawing people in through the use of hooks like new messages, snap streaks, and stories. Initially, this content was actually rather focused and felt in line with what Snapchat was trying to be. It started out as this idea to build collective stories and curated shared experiences, such as sports games where users could submit different perspectives of the same event. The Discover page soon grew out of this. Evan Spiegel grew up as an editor at his high school and had a passion for journalism. It seemed only natural to bring this to the app. He used his Hollywood connections to establish relationships with some of the biggest names in news and entertainment. The objective was to make Snapchat a digital portal into a fun and raw perspective that you could only get on the app. As time went on, however, the more established sources started to flee and clickbait sites started to reign. Today, this is by far Snapchat's weakest area, and I personally know a lot of people who are greatly turned off to the app because of it. Their latest foray into Spotlight, which is their take on TikTok or Instagram Reels, might be exactly what they need about now. Snapchat is intentionally more personal and less polished. The inability to make your Snap story look as pristine as your Instagram one is intentional. It all comes back to their central philosophy. In 2016, before their upcoming IPO, Snapchat rebranded to Snap Inc. and established this new mission statement. Snap Inc. is a camera company. We believe that reinventing the camera represents the greatest opportunity to improve the way people live and communicate. We contribute to human progress by empowering people to express themselves, live in the moment, learn about the world, and have fun together. Because of the launch of their hardware product Spectacles, it was the Snap Inc. as a camera company line that got most of the attention by tech blogs. But I would argue that the latter statements are even more important. The focus on what makes conversation authentic is what separates them from their competitors.
We really identified that this ephemeral thing was core to conversation. And so if you wanted to have a conversation, one of the best parts about it was that you were left with the memory, but not necessarily a transcript. And I think that really drove the great feeling that you have when you share snaps with friends and they're silly and not exactly perfect.
Evan Spiegel has a fundamentally different philosophy on how human beings work. He would argue that this all comes back to identity and how we present ourselves. Traditional social media tends to function with a philosophy of accumulation. The nature of a timeline says, my identity is the collection of all my past experiences. Snapchat, on the other hand, follows a philosophy of instant expression. It says, I don't have a past you can see. My identity is who I am right now. Who I am right now is certainly influenced by my past, but those past people don't define who I am today. This difference may seem minute, but it's important. This is what has set them apart this entire time, and it guides every decision they make. So is this philosophy really that special? And why does having a deeper purpose matter? Simon Sinek delivered one of the most watched TED Talks of all time, called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. In it, he describes his idea of the golden circle.
Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist?
Snapchat has this. It has a belief that we are first and foremost meant to live in the moment, and that is still possible online. Snapchat will never be the next Facebook. It will never balloon to that scale. But that also isn't the goal. An important part of the Start With Why principle is that your objective isn't to target everyone. It's to attract those who believe what you believe. And that's exactly what Snapchat has done.
Well, I think we have this really unique group of people that are committed to living in the moment, right, and sharing meaningful things, not because it makes them more popular, but because they actually want to connect with their friends.
These values stand against what will let them scale to the size of Facebook, but they also carve out a very specific niche. And as time goes on and people become more aware of what social media is doing to us, this niche continues to grow.
I think fundamentally it's important to understand that Snapchat is not just a bunch of features.
Right.
It really has an underlying philosophy that runs directly counter to traditional social media.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why traditional social media feels threatened. Because fundamentally, if people realize that competing with their friends for likes and attention is kind of unpleasant and really not that great,
Agreed.
then I think they're going to look for alternatives. And what we've said at Snapchat is actually there's this great alternative, which is all about building deeper relationships with people that you're close to.
Right.
And we believe that empowering that self-expression is really important.
In a time where people have to craft the perfect image of themselves online, Snapchat says, don't worry, live it and share a snippet to the people you're actually close to. In an era where tweets from years prior can ruin a career, Snapchat asks, what if human beings are meant to forget? In a digital age where so many people get stuck communicating by text, Snapchat reminds us that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think this is how Snapchat made its comeback. Nearly 10 years ago, Reggie Brown stumbled upon the magical idea of sending disappearing photos. And to this day, Evan Spiegel and Bobby Murphy believe in it. They have staked everything in their lives on the belief that there is something special behind people being free to live in the moment and empowering that. Combine this purpose with Evan Spiegel's constant growth from a smug 23-year-old to a leader capable of learning from his biggest failures, and I think it paints a pretty clear picture as to how they've managed to survive. Are things perfect? No. There's a lot of room for growth in this company. I would even argue that they might be overvalued right now. But all of that to say, I believe there is something special about Snapchat, and so long as they stay true to their beliefs, I don't think they'll be going anywhere. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, feel free to like and subscribe because I have more content like this coming. I really enjoy exploring ideas through video, And if you would like to support me in this and help me justify the hours I'm not working to make these things, I have a Patreon where you can support me, and I'll give you behind the scenes access and looks into how I put these things together. Additionally, I have a Q&A video that's going to be coming out soon because in preparation for this, I researched over 100 hours into Snapchat, and I have so many more thoughts that couldn't make it into this 15-minute video. This video is really about what the soul of Snapchat was, but there still is a lot of technical nitty-gritty stuff that I didn't get to get into, such as where does augmented reality come into play, and is are spectacles really that special? So if you want to follow me and ask comments down below, I will aggregate some of the best ones, and until then, I'll see you later.